Hey, welcome back to Cool Classics. Today we're going to take a look at the life and career of Pat Priest, best known for playing Marilyn Munster on the Munsters TV series. I got some cool clips, some freaky facts. Here we go. She was born Patricia Ann Priest, August 15th, 1936 in Bountiful, Utah. Her parents, Roy and Ivy Baker Priest, raised her in a traditional Mormon household. Her mother taught speech and drama class at the church and was also in charge of putting on a play that combined actors from all the churches in the area, so Pat grew up around all of this. Eventually performing in front of the crowds as sort of an opening act, she went ahead and did a pantomime routine to a comic record in the background. From there, she started to perform at Lions Club and Rotary Club events all around Utah. Now, her mother also entered into the world of politics, and when Pat was a junior in high school, her mother's political career just took off. Dwight Eisenhower was elected President of the United States, and he appointed her mother Treasurer of the United States. So that meant the family had to pack up and move to Washington, D.C. halfway through her junior year. She said, "I felt like my life just ended." So here's a little freaky fact for you. If you have any American currency, any bills, ones, fives, tens, 20s, whatever it is, if it was dated after January 28th, 1953 to January 29th, 1961, if you look down, usually on the left side, you can see her mother's name, Ivy Baker Priest. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well, this administration did run a survey of the gold in Fort Knox. Can you tell us, was it actually all there?
A full accounting and audit of all of the assets on hand, the gold at Fort Knox, the gold on hand at the mints and so on, and we found everything to be in order.
Although Pat initially thought her life was over when she had to move, it was really just beginning. In 1952, while still in high school, she became a page girl at the Republican National Convention. And then in 1954, she graduated from Washington Lee High School in Arlington, Virginia. Later that summer, she entered a beauty pageant and won Queen of Norfolk, Virginia. She then started to perform on stage around the Washington D.C. area in productions such as Bus Stop and The Tender Trap, and that's when she was noticed by WTTG, a local television station, and she was hired to be a singer and actress. Also around this time, she had fallen in love with Pierce Jensen Jr., and the two of them got married in 1955. Now, Pierce was in the Navy, so a few years later he was transferred to a naval base in California. So Pat quit her job at the local television station and moved out west. That's when the couple decided to start a family. So in 1958, at the age of 22, Pat had her first son named Lance, and at the age of 23, she had her second son, Pierce Andrew III. After spending a couple of years at home with her kids, she started to go out on the weekend to plays at a community theater in San Francisco, and before you knew it, she was on stage. That's where she was noticed by this photographer who was there shooting some photos for this publication, and he asked her if she would like to do some modeling. She said at first these were just swimsuit photos to put on the cover of magazines, but then that led to being in advertisements for certain products. And from there, she got to be in a TV commercial. So that's when she got an agent, and her agent would shop her portfolio around, and he would also send her out to auditions for TV shows. Now, her father passed away in 1959, and her mother was very busy with all of her responsibilities. So Pat said, "Here I am, living on the West Coast. We're a happy, young, married couple. Everything was really good. So I wasn't under any pressure to make it in Hollywood. I was acting because I wanted to, and I was going on these auditions because I wanted to. It wasn't make or break." And it turns out that was a good thing, because it took her 4 years before she got to appear on television. She played a waitress in one episode of The Lieutenant. Then the same year she appeared on the Jack Benny program as a backup dancer. But then in 1964, that all changed. She appeared in an episode of the TV show called Valentine's Day, followed quickly by an appearance on the TV show Wendy and Me. Then after an appearance in the Dr. Kildare episode called A Candle in the Window, she ends up on Perry Mason, the case of the Tandem target.
Do you have any idea, Mrs. Hodge, who Sally is?
Why, yes, my husband's secretary, Sally Young. Mr. Hodge asked me to type a copy of those notes and give them to our head chemist for further testing.
What kind of agencies did he want listed?
For private detective agencies.
Do you know why Sumner Hodge was looking for a private detective?
No, I don't know. I'm only a secretary, Mr. Mason.
After that, she appears on My Favorite Martian, episode My Uncle the Folk Singer.
Tim, you haven't said 2 words all evening.
I'm sorry, Della. I got something on my mind.
Your uncle's giving a special concert.
A special concert?
Yeah, I've gone all out. I've got all these big ads, and I've had the place all redone. I've sunk every dime I have into it.
Get on board. Get on board. Little children, get on board. Little children, there's room for more.
Well, that's some mighty fine singing. Now, she also appears on an episode of Death Valley Days called The Left Hand is Damned. This one is hosted by Ronald Reagan, which is a freaky coincidence for something that happens later.
You mean it's happened before?
It's happened before, and it'll happen again.
Nobody can't stay here.
Well, what do you ever do to you?
Oh, Dora, you know that his kind of gun-crazy saddle tramp is good for nothing but trouble.
Now, while all of this was going on, the Munsters TV series had just completed its first 13 episodes, which was all that they had a contract for. Now, before they could renew and go for the rest of the season, Beverly Owen, who played Marilyn Munster, quit the show. She was homesick, she wanted to go get married and live with her husband. They let her out of her contract, and now they were in a jam-up because they didn't want to write the character out of the show like some sitcoms do, or replace her with someone who didn't look the same. They wanted to go for a seamless transition, a new actress that looked almost exactly like her. That's when Pat's agent received a phone call to see if she was available for an audition that week. And so she headed down without even knowing the name of the show because they didn't tell them that. It was hush-hush, but she knew that it was sort of an emergency situation. So when she gets there, there are 5 other girls ahead of her. When they finally call her into the room, she looks around and sees that there are a lot of people in there, men and women from the wardrobe department. Now the women come over to her first, and they ask her her height as they're measuring her. They ask her her weight, and they start looking through her hair. Then the producers have her step forward and they ask her, "Have you seen the Munsters television show?" And she says, "I've seen 1 episode." And they said, "Perfect. You'll be reading for the part of Marilyn Munster." She instantly thinks, uh-oh, something's going on here. So she looks over the script with them, and then they begin the reading with the producers playing the parts of the other characters. When they're done, they tell her that was really good, and they have the women come back over, and this time the women are looking closer at her facial features, and they go back through her hair and ask her, "Is this your natural hair color?" And she says, "Yes, it is." And they go, "And it's real," and laugh. Well, it turns out Beverly Owen was wearing a wig the whole time, and Pat's hair matched the wig, so that was a bonus. Next, they do a series of close-up photos of just her face from different angles. Then they have her come back over and read through a different script with them. When she's done, they tell her, "Good job, thank you for coming, we'll let you know." And as she walks out, opens the doors, she sees there are still 7 more women waiting to get in there, so she doesn't think too much about it, like nothing's gonna happen. Well, all of this happened on a Wednesday, and when she got home that evening, her agent called her and said, "The studio wants to make an offer to you. Can you talk on the phone in the morning?" She said yes. They talk on the phone. She gets a preliminary offer. She accepts. Friday morning, she has to show up, sign the contracts, and Monday morning at 6 a.m., she's on set. She's the new Marilyn Munster.
Marilyn, how do you feel about the new cars?
Well, I think that
And how come you didn't ask us to parents' night at school?
Where did you hear about that?
Well, dear, I was dusting your room, and I just happened to come across the invitation.
Yes, Marilyn. Don't try to hide anything. You know, in this family, nothing ever stays buried.
Why wouldn't you want me, of all people, to go to Parents' Night?
Oh, I just didn't think you'd care for it. It's going to be sort of a dinner dance.
Dancing has never been one of my strong points. I guess you could say I have 2 left feet.
That's what happens when they put someone together in the dark.
She said, I was so nervous walking onto the set that morning. I was afraid of what the other cast members were going to think of me. I really didn't know the whole story about why Beverly Owen left. I thought, are they going to be mad that I'm replacing their friend? But the opposite happened. Everybody came up individually, greeted me, told me that they were happy I was there, welcome aboard, and don't worry about anything.
Herman left early, didn't he?
Yes, the sweet thing went downtown to take dancing lessons.
Well, I'm surprised that he never learned to dance when he was younger.
When other young men were going to parties and dances, I'm afraid he was always tied up in the laboratory.
Pat tells this story of when she's getting ready to film her first scene for the Munsters. She says, I probably looked very nervous, so Yvonne DiCarlo came over and asked me if everything's all right. And I said, yes, I just have a lot on my mind. And Yvonne says, well, whatever it is, get rid of it, because right now you're about to have fun. And I said, thank you so much. I've just been worried that if the audience doesn't like me, they might cancel the show. And Yvonne laughed and said, honey, if this show gets canceled, it won't be because of you. She said from that point on, her and Yvonne DiCarlo were like long-lost family members.
Mr. Benson, this is my niece, Marilyn.
Well, I'm very glad to meet you, Miss Allen. My first name is Benson, but you can call me Marilyn. What I mean to say is I sure am delighted to meet you.
Now, the reoccurring gag was that Marilyn was the ugly one of the family, so they always tried to find her a husband because they felt sorry for her.
Why don't you sit over here on the sofa next to Marilyn? It's much more comfy.
She makes chicken soup with feathers?
Doesn't everyone?
I borrowed the pillow out of his chair, so he has to sit on the sofa next to Marilyn.
Good! What are you doing?
I've got Eddie stashed away in a dungeon. It's part of my master plan.
You know, Marilyn, it's been a long time since I've met a girl like you. Hey,
What's the matter?
there's something coming up out of the floor, and it's got fangs.
That's just my little cousin Eddie.
But one of the light bulbs went out down in the dungeon. Thanks a lot.
Now they're sitting close together with the lights down low.
All we need is some soft music.
The organ, it's playing by itself.
Yes. Isn't it romantic?
Now, Pat says here she was worried that the audience wouldn't like her replacing Beverly Owen. But the fact was, the mass majority, the casual viewers, didn't even notice a difference. It helped, though, that she was the exact same height and the exact same weight and looked very similar. So if they weren't paying super close attention to the opening credits, then it was just a seamless transition, because Beverly Owen's last episode aired on December 17th, 1964, and Pat's aired 1 week later, December 24th, 1964. It wasn't until the first 13 episodes started to go into reruns until the vast majority of people caught on, and by then, they were happy with Pat.
Thank you, Uncle Herman. Catch.
Now, unfortunately, a new TV series came out and it debuted head-to-head against the Munsters, and it was called Batman. Now, with Batman on at the exact same time, in full color, action-packed, and reaching the same demographics, it was just too much for the Munsters in the ratings. They sank to an all-time low, and the studio decided at the end of the second season it would be canceled. So they had to go ahead and film out the remaining episodes. But then, towards the end of the season, they came up with an idea. The studio said, we're going to film an all-color Munsters movie with the exact same cast, except for one exception. We're going to replace Pat Priest with Debbie Watson, who will now be playing Marilyn. This came as a shock to everyone, and when they questioned the studio about it, the studio replied with, "Well, we already have Debbie Watson under contract." But then Pat Priest says, "I'm already under contract too." So everybody knew the real reason. The studio wanted to make some sort of change to add some spice to the show other than just the Technicolor. They knew they couldn't mess with the main characters, and they've already replaced Marilyn once before. So this time they were going to bring in the new It Girl in Hollywood, and she just happens to be very pretty and 12 years younger. Now, to their credit, Yvonne DiCarlo, Fred Gwynne, and Al Lewis all disagreed with the studio's decision, but they couldn't do anything about it. The studio had the last say. Now, on a bittersweet note, the Munsters Go Home movie didn't spark enough interest to bring the series back for a third season, and the biggest complaint about the movie was the fact that they replaced Marilyn with a new girl. Now, heading into 1967, Pat was officially out of work, and to make matters worse, her husband filed for divorce. She said these were very stressful times. I was at home with the children, my husband was gone, and we were going through this whole legal procedure. All I could do was go out and try and find a couple spots on television to keep myself relevant. And here's one of those spots right now. She appears on The Lucy Show playing a stewardess in the episode Lucy Flies to London.
Here you are, seat 10C.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Would you like me to take that for you?
Oh, yes, thank you. Forgetting about the difference in time, do I set my watch ahead or back?
Oh, it's 3 hours later in New York.
I'm going all the way to London, England, in Europe.
The time difference is 8 hours between here and London.
London, England.
In Europe.
Thank you.
You need to go check out that episode. It's a good one. Let's just say you don't want to be on the plane with Lucy. Next, she appears on the Mannix TV series episode Beyond the Shadow of a Dream. After that, though, she got another big break. She's going to be in an Elvis movie. Easy Come, Easy Go.
Co-starring Dodie Marshall, Pat Priest, Pat Harrington, Skip Ward, Frank McHugh, and Elsa Lanchester. Just lovelies who ever filled out a bikini.
Now, the movie was released in March of '67, and it bombed at the box office so bad that they hurried up and filmed a second Elvis movie with different people called Double Trouble, and it was released in May to try and take the heat off of this one, but it did even worse. So unfortunately for Pat, being in an Elvis movie didn't help her career at all because it was the wrong Elvis movie to be in. Now, here's a freaky fact that I thought was cool. See the car that Elvis is driving in the Easy Come, Easy Go movie? Doesn't that look like the Munsters coach? Well, that's because it was made by the same guy. George Barris made both that one and the Munsters coach along with the Munsters Dragula. Now, he also, after this movie was done with Elvis, reused that car for the Batman TV series as the Joker Mobile. He also made the Batmobile. And Batman's the show that canceled the Munsters. And everything connects together. See what I mean by freaky? Now let's take it a step further. See that car that Pat is sitting on there? Do you notice that trophy in her hands? Well, she collected cool cars and would enter them into contests, and she won with that Thunderbird right there, which was customized by George Barris, who made all of these. Now, she also talked to Elvis after the movie was done, and he let her look at his cars, and she bought one of his Cadillacs for $3,000. She said, at this point, I really felt like my career was okay and that I would find more work, but in 1968, everything just stopped. She only appeared one time that year on television. It was on the Ironside TV series. And then in 1969, she appeared one time on the Virginian TV series. She said, for 3 years, I couldn't find any work. If it wasn't for Elizabeth Montgomery letting me appear on Bewitched once per season, I wouldn't have had anything.
I'll think of something. Just try to be patient.
I was supposed to meet my girl for lunch 2 hours ago. You'd better talk to her. Tell her you're a friend of the family.
Is this Ruthie?
Yes, it is. Who is this?
Oh, this is a friend of the family. And Irving wanted you to know that he's a little under the weather.
Oh. And why didn't he call me himself?
He's, not quite up to it.
Well, you can tell Mr. Irving Bates that he stood me up for the last time, that he's a pretty small person.
But Ruthie!
Now, during this same time period, her mother's term in Washington, D.C. had ended, so she moved to California, and there she ran again for office, and this time was elected California State Treasurer. Then she goes on stage at the Republican National Convention, introduces Ronald Reagan to the audience, and nominates him for Governor of California, with Pat in attendance. And there's Ronald Reagan, who was the host of the Death Valley Days episode that she was in. See what I mean? It's all a freaky scene. Despite all of this, Pat's career just stalled. In 1971, she was in one episode of Mission Impossible, and then in 1973, she appears in a couple B movies. Some Call It Loving, and The Incredible Two-Headed Transplant. After that, she doesn't find any more work until 1976 when she appears one time on the Mary Tyler Moore Show episode Sue Ann's Sister.
Doorbell.
Good to see you, dear. I want you to meet all my friends. And stay away from the sophisticated hunk with a hole in his sock. He's mine.
Well, you know, I'm just so happy to meet y'all. I mean, Sue Ann has told me so much about you.
Sue Ann tells us you're from Dixie.
That's right.
My wife and I use your cups a lot.
My favorite team, the Atlanta Falcons, is going to play your Minnesota Vikings.
You like football?
Oh, does a hound dog like possum?
Oh, she better watch out. Betty White is getting mad. Now, about a year after that episode aired, her mother passed away, and Pat still hadn't found any more work in Hollywood, and she was starting to feel like an outsider. So she went ahead and made the decision. She's moving back to Utah, her home state. Now, as time went on, she started to settle into her new life, and she began taking real estate courses, eventually gaining her realtor's license. She also met a man and fell in love, Frederick Hansing, and the two of them were married in 1981. By the 1990s, she was no longer just helping people buy or sell their homes. She was actually going out and buying old Victorian homes and restoring them to their original look and design. She became so well known for this that people around the country would hire her to restore and remodel their Victorian home purchases. So this was a whole long career. Now, she says that when she left Hollywood, she didn't look back or ever try to go on any more auditions. She just went on with her life. But in 1995, the producers for the TV movie Here Come the Munsters reached out to her. They told her they couldn't make the movie in good faith without asking any of the original surviving cast members if they would like to have a small part in it. And she thought that was very respectful, so she went ahead and flew out and played a guest in a restaurant for a scene. Now in 2022, Rob Zombie has done the same thing. He invited her and Butch Patrick to appear in his new Munsters movie. Now the word is that she's going to play the Transylvania Airlines announcer, which might mean you only get to hear her voice. But still, that's a good thing that Rob Zombie did. He paid his respects. And now for my favorite part of this video. As of September 8th, 2022, Pat Priest is 86 years old, alive and healthy, and she's also been appearing at Munster and Monster conventions around the country. So if you get a chance, make sure you go up and meet her, because she says that ever since the show ended, the fans of the Munsters have came up to her, talked so nicely with her, that her life has been better because of it. So if you were one of those people, just know that she loved that moment just as much as you. Now I'll leave you with something funny that she recently said in an interview. She says the only regret that she has in her career was that she sold Elvis's Cadillac in the early 1980s. If she would have just left it stored in the garage, it would have done better than any 401k ever could have. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you've ever met Pat Priest, leave a comment down below. Let me know where you met her, what you talked about. Did you ever buy a house from her? I like to hear these stories. Also, my last video, Fred Gwynn, Herman Munster, it blew up and it brought a lot of other videos with it. So many new subscribers, I mean a lot. Look at the number we're at now. Unbelievable. This is amazing. I want to thank every one of you because it was the individual support that you gave that last video that helped it crack the YouTube algorithm. And that's something that doesn't just happen. And because of all of you, I will be back in the future with more cool classics.